Hello, my name is Matt and this is Pixel Burn, where I usually cast a sarcastic eye over the more important, interesting or irritating things to have happened in the week's video game news. Unfortunately, gaming had a nervous breakdown about a month ago and is currently thrashing about in a padded cell, shitting itself. You may not be aware of this, but gaming recently erupted into full-blown civil war, although calling it a war is probably giving it too much credit. It's more like a slap fight between two half-starved chimps, knee-deep in stagnant piss at the bottom of a septic tank. One side, Group A, claims it has legitimate concerns about things like the relationships between developers and journalists, cliquishness and cronyism in both the indie gaming scene and games journalism, whether journalists are properly separating themselves from their friendships with developers to review their games, and that games journalism as a whole has descended to a level of clickbaiting sensationalism, while also throwing around more gendered insults than a witchfinder's personal memoirs, using a charitable cause as a shield to deflect criticism, indulging in wild conspiracy theories, and driving out some of the more diverse voices gaming sorely needs with a barrage of harassment. Meanwhile, Team 1 argues rightly enough that a socially stunted elitist element in gaming is using questions of games journalism ethics to push an exclusionist agenda, that friendships occur in every industry, many games journalists and indie developers barely make enough money to eat, nobody is asking these questions of ethics about big publishers, and that wide-scale harassment, up to and including death threats, is absolutely not fucking called for whatso-fucking-ever, while at the same time branding all critics as misogynists, outright dismissing any who can't be so easily pigeonholed, like women and minorities for example, shutting down any discussion of the topic whenever they can, assuming a smug, overbearing, vomit-inducing, holier-than-thou attitude to what they see as the unwashed, toxic gamer masses, indulging in wild conspiracy theories, and generally avoiding any kind of introspection or self-critique whatsoever. Each side also vociferously insists that there are no sides to this other than their own, of course, and that if you're not with them, then you're with the proverbial terrorists. On that other side that doesn't exist. Even so much as speaking to one side is enough to have you marked as the enemy by the other, and God forbid if you refuse to unconditionally drink either side's particular brand of Kool-Aid. That's enough to make you fucking anti-citizen one apparently. As in the case of Stephen Williams, better known to the internet and gaming at large as Boogie2988. For daring to put forward his own relatively moderate opinion, he has been called a brainwashed feminist by women-hating fuckwits, and also fat-shamed by people who sanctimoniously claim to be above that sort of thing. So how did gaming suddenly become madder than a sack of badgers? Well, I've spent the past several weeks rappelling down this particular insane rabbit hole to try and chronicle this whole sad affair, and bring you the sane person's guide to gaming's nervous breakdown. So fasten your seatbelts, gird your loins and bite down on a stick as I try and explain this all to you before I lose the will to live. The whole sorry mess kicked off last month when Erin Yoni, the ex-boyfriend of prominent indie game personality Zoe Quinn, posted a 5,000 plus word autopsy report about their relationship online. Because as we all know, revealing almost every sordid detail of your train wreck of a relationship is right near the top of the big list of good ideas. Especially when you're accusing your ex of cheating on you with at least 3 different men, one allegedly being Zoe's boss at Love Shack Games, one being on the judging panel of an indie game festival that featured her game, and another being games journalist Nathan Grayson of Kotaku. Naturally, the gaming community's reaction to this sad, tawdry, sensationalist yet ultimately irrelevant gossip rag hullabaloo was about as calm, collected, sensible and non-judgmental as you would expect. Ms. Quinn's alleged horizontal dalliances with Nathan Grayson in particular were cited by critics as the reason he gave a positive review to Zoe's game Depression Quest, a sort of choose-your-own-adventure game where instead of turning to page 134 to see if your character slays the kobold, it's to see whether or not your character can even drag their despondent, unmedicated carcass out of bed in the morning. Except Nathan Grayson never reviewed Depression Quest and has only ever referenced Zoe Quinn in 2 articles, both written before any alleged shenanigans under the sheets. One was about a list of a gajillion games, including Depression Quest, that made it onto Steam Greenlight during one particularly slow news week. The other was about a failed game jam in which Zoe was only one of many prominent gaming personalities involved. If that's all the coverage banging a games journalist supposedly gets you, then that's my plan for industry dominance right out the fucking window. I mean, what am I going to do with these now, huh? Besides the washing up. And, soothing chapped lips. The alleged Zoe Quinn love septagon of cronyism wasn't the ultimate cause of this current shitstorm, however. Merely a sledgehammer to the pressure valve on something that's been building for some time. The release of another Tropes vs Women in Video Games episode by Anita Sarkeesian wasn't the cause either, it just inadvertently made the whole situation blow up even more, like a meth lab run by a pyromaniac. For the record, I very much enjoyed Anita's recent video. I don't see anything sinister or threatening in her series, and I firmly believe that critique is ultimately beneficial to the medium of video games as a whole, however simplistic that critique may be. All her series really does is just highlight some of the god-awful shit that passes for video game narrative, albeit from a feminist perspective. You could do the same from a Marxist one if you were so inclined. As with all cultural hegemonies, the Mushroom Kingdom's ruling class imposed their values upon the proletariat via 4 main methods. Gramsci identified these methods as violence, ideology, political control and financial coercion. But even saying something as inoffensive as "I don't think her videos are all that bad" is all it takes to be branded a pussy-whipped lobotomised drone of the gaming gynocracy these days. Conversely, if I were to dare criticise her videos for being a bit simple or lacking in depth, then half of Tumblr would immediately start screaming for me to be sacrificed to some wasp goddess or something. I don't know, I don't use Tumblr. It's full of mad people. As with everything Anita ever does, up to and including breathing, a gaggle of braying psychopaths immediately crawled out of the gutter to bombard her with death and rape threats. Meanwhile, Anita's video continued doing the rounds, assisted by none other than Tim Schafer, head of Double Fine Productions and the closest thing humanity has to a living, breathing Muppet. A man so unrepentantly joyous that if you clapped him in chains and handed him over to ISIS, they'd only let him go again 10 minutes later, completely unharmed and with a complimentary jeep full of AK-47s. Schafer tweeted the link to Anita's latest video, calling it required viewing for game developers, and in response he got bombarded with insults, which frankly made me rather sad, because every time someone is mean to Tim Schafer, God kills a Fraggle. By this point, the self-proclaimed anti-corruption crowd, Group A, had gathered under the Twitter hashtags GamerGate and Not Your Shield. The first one was focused, to put it generously, on protesting perceived corruption in games journalism. The other was adopted by an apparently diverse group of people objecting to being exploited by game journalists promoting an agenda. In response, the self-identified pro-equality brigade, aka Team 1, immediately started accusing everyone using the Not Your Shield tag of being sock puppet accounts made up by neck-bearded white boys on 4chan. If you didn't fit that stereotype, then you were simply disregarded as either an innocent minority dupe, misled by sensationalist YouTube videos, or a confused woman suffering from internalised misogyny.
You just complicate the narrative.
Things got progressively more surreal when prominent gaming and geek culture personalities from all across the political spectrum got on board, from Will Wheaton chiming in with support for Sarkeesian to Adam Baldwin of all people, getting involved on the side of the GamerGate crowd. That's right, Jane Cobb from Firefly got involved. Dear Nathan Fillion, have you seen how much games publishers are putting behind a paywall in Day 1 DLC these days? It's disgraceful. Please sign my e-petition to ban this sort of thing. Sincerely, Matt. Kiss, kiss, kiss. The hero of Canton, the man they call Jane, wasn't the only sci-fi character to join the GamerGate ranks. One of the lizard aliens from the TV show V got involved too, seen here disguised as a blogger for right-wing wanking circus Breitbart.com. Meanwhile, the games press churned out a fistful of articles announcing the death of the gamer, specifically the idea of gamer as a consumer identity manufactured by big corporations to make you buy games, which is a good point to consider. Unfortunately, nearly every piece written along those lines was dripping with more sanctimonious smuggery than a Tory party conference held in a sweat lodge built by giants. As with all senseless conflicts, there have been casualties, the most prominent of these being indie gaming's enfant terrible Phil Fish, who had around 1.5 gigabytes of personal information and financial information about himself and his company Polytron leaked onto the internet after the company's Dropbox account got compromised. Information including his social security number, home address, Fez sales figures, passwords, financial contracts, and pretty much everything you could ever need if you wanted to utterly ruin a person's life. The pro-GamerGate faction immediately accused Phil of having doxed himself as part of a grand conspiracy hatched by the other side to make them look bad. Some even went as far as to say he deserved it for acting like a surly arsehole on the internet. Take a moment to let the irony of that sink in. Then there was the Indiegogo campaign by a group calling themselves the Fine Young Capitalists, or TFYC for short, to organise a game jam to get more women into game development. The concept was an open call where any woman could come up with a game idea, the top 5 best ideas were assigned to concept artists to design their game, and the internet would vote for the best one. If there was enough interest in the form of pre-orders through crowdfunding, TFYC would work with the winner to create their game and give her a percentage of the profits, with the rest going to charity. Members of the GamerGate crowd chipped in with a bunch of donations, and 4chan even designed a mascot for the campaign called Vivian James, whose name is a pun on video games. Not necessarily a good pun, but TFYC's involvement in this maelstrom of madness came about when they alleged that Zoe Quinn, yep, you just can't get away from her, sabotaged their funding campaign with a series of malicious tweets that supposedly inspired one of her supporters to leak personal information about one of TFYC's members. Zoe herself claimed she only ever referred to TFYC regarding their lack of a policy regarding trans women and why they expected concept artists to work for free, in a total of about 4 tweets. Multiply that number by 11 and you get a somewhat more accurate figure. She was raising important questions, however. Expecting developers to work for free is like websites that ask you to write for them for free in exchange for exposure. But then what do you expect from a bunch of people calling themselves capitalists? Speaking of Zoe Quinn, she popped up again, claiming to possess undeniable evidence GamerGate was a grand conspiracy orchestrated by 4chan to drive out women and minority voices in gaming. Evidence in the form of incriminating screenshots she took while hanging out in a public IRC chat channel for 2 weeks like the world's most unremarkable secret agent. Still, there you have it. Case closed. Everything was a grand conspiracy orchestrated by 4chan and their magic mind control rays, so GamerGate should go away now, right? Well, no. It's still trundling along at a steady pace on Twitter and elsewhere on the internet with no sign of slowing down anytime soon. Not even Bungie's much anticipated FPS Destiny has been able to oust the GamerGate hashtag from Twitter as some people predicted, although that could be because the plot to Destiny is a load of pompous overblown bollocks. GamerGate isn't necessarily winning, however. Many of the demands issued in its name are contradictory, muddled, unrealistic and unworkable. While attempts to prove that prominent indie developers have been involved in charity fraud and racketeering have backfired big time, some individuals have also tried to somehow prove Anita Sarkeesian faked the threat she received by calling the San Francisco police to demand the records of her 911 call. Needless to say, the entire sorry saga is still ongoing. For the time being, both sides continue sniping at each other online in various ways, and will doubtless continue doing so for the foreseeable future. By now, this whole overblown affair probably looks like a great big stinking tangled mess to most of you, and that's really the only point I'm trying to make. Because despite what wingnuts on each side would tell you, that their side is wholly pure and awesome and innocent, while the other side is wretched and diseased and rife with sin, it's a bit more nuanced than that. This is not a simple fairy story of good versus evil with some loping shoggoth of misogyny on one side and a band of valiant progressive light warriors on the other, nor is it an epic 300-esque final stand where the last true gamers hold the hot gates against an oncoming horde of social justice warriors come to take away their tits and guns games and make them all have primal scream, gluten-free cooking and yoga sessions with each other. You see, for all my talk of each side attacking the other, it really ultimately just boils down to 2 highly vocal minorities bellowing at each other. For every crusading idiot on each side, there are hundreds of calm, sensible, moderate people reaching out, building bridges and engaging each other in polite and civil debate and discussion. You just can't hear them over all the noise from the carnival of arseholes. My hope is that these quiet, humble masses will together create a stronger, healthier gaming scene that embraces critique and doesn't judge people on the types of games they like to play. A place where someone can enjoy a muscles and guns romp for what it is without being called a misogynist, where people can also make games like Gone Home without being shouted down for pushing some perceived agenda, and where I can still be a grumpy old bastard who takes the piss out of everything. One positive thing to have come out of all of this is the surge in donations to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to the tune of thousands of dollars, which just goes to show that gamers of all stripes, even those who can't bear to be called gamers, can accomplish amazing things, even when we're thrashing 7 shades of shit out of each other. I have included a link to the AFSP and other similar organisations in other countries in the description below if you yourself would like to make a donation. That's all for this interminably long episode of Pixel Burn. If you liked it, please do let me know and let your friends, family and the secret gaming Illuminati know as well. At the very least, I hope you found it tolerable. If you didn't like it, however, then, well, that's fine. Because I'll be up a fucking mountain somewhere playing Scribblenauts until this insanity blows over. You can go now.